Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started, and those that are joining us can join us just in a little while. My name is Amy Bonus, and I would like to say thank you for joining us. I've been a mortgage lender for about 30 years now, and I think that this is a very good time to, you have a small possibility here because you've had sort of a little, softening in the market. Would also like to welcome Chris Hutchinson, my right-hand person on my team, and our expert speaker today, born and raised here in North Carolina, Chris Webb, who is the owner and broker in charge of Property Specific, which is a great firm. If you haven't heard of them before, in Wake Forest, they know all about this area. They're phenomenal at their jobs. And we're very lucky to have him on the call today on the webinar. So welcome, Chris, and thanks for taking the time. Our talking points today are just going to be hot spots around these three areas: Youngsville, Wendell, and Franklinton. Chris is going to talk about the history, the growth. He's actually going to show us a few listings, like a listing in each area. He's going to talk about the pros and the cons, and we'll talk a little bit about financing options today. The growth of rent in our area has just been absolutely phenomenal. Okay, so this is a chart of what has happened over the last 40 years here in our area, and it's been phenomenal. So buying a piece of real estate and keeping it, renting it out, is a very good idea if you can find the funds to do that. Not only do you make money in real estate by what you pay for the property, and then obviously what you sell the property for, that's appreciation, or what, hopefully you don't sell the property, you hold on to it. But sometimes we find that people are able to buy properties under value that need to be fixed up. And maybe they'll spend, I'm using this as an example, $50,000 to fix it up, but it increased the value of their property $100,000. Some people like doing stuff like that. So they might buy it and flip it. They might buy it and hold on to it and rent it long term. Also, keep in mind that every single month that you make a mortgage payment, you are paying down principal, right? So one day you are not going to have a mortgage payment anymore. And hopefully you've taken out a fixed rate loan, because if rates continue to rise, which was, I was watching a report this morning about that, and they still feel like interest rates are going to tick up a little bit this year. And then I sent Lori, Chris, I sent your wife this morning the 6 different versions of what they think what is going to happen with rates over the next 2 years. And the bottom line is they feel that rates will come down in the next couple of years. Also, when you buy real estate as an investment, you are able to write off a lot on the piece of real estate. You're able to write off property management, your insurance, taxes, your mortgage interest, depreciation, landscaping, a whole bunch of stuff, which makes it a very good thing if you're trying to reduce your taxable income. And eventually, I think you could have some cash flow. I really don't think that's realistic to promise cash flow now unless you're putting a huge amount down. About Chris, he is originally from Raleigh. He graduated from East Carolina University, and he has been involved in real estate. In fact, he was involved in property management. He still is. And he was vice president of asset management and director of property management for a private company that controlled over 20,000 units. Folks, that's a lot of properties that company was managing. He was involved with a $100 million acquisition of a student housing portfolio, and he was honored as the magazine's top 30 under 30 national award. He's really smart. He knows a lot about the area. He has just common sense, and he has something called experience, besides a really great brain, to share with us today about. He chose these areas to talk about. So I'm going to quickly hand over the ball to him, the mic to him. And this is what you're going to be talking about, Chris, right? I don't think we missed anything here, right?
No, and thank you, Amy. And just glancing through some of the people that are on here. Lorna Padley, nice to see your name. So Lorna was one of our first handful of property management clients. Gosh, maybe 6, 7 years ago. And then we sold her house out in Heritage a handful of years ago. So I hope she's doing well. But yeah, so we'll talk about they're not tertiary markets. I classify them probably more of secondary, and Raleigh is slowly becoming kind of a major market. So I still struggle with calling it secondary and tertiary markets. I think they're just more kind of sub markets of the triangle or Raleigh. But Franklin County, Wake County. Wake County obviously has been on a lot of people's radar for some time now. But there's a couple other counties, and I think over the next several weeks, Amy has guest speakers lined up to talk about different counties. But whether it's Franklin County and Johnston County, Harnett County, I know I'm not speaking on Johnston and Harnett today, but those are two other counties kind of south of Raleigh or east of Raleigh that I think are really poised for growth. But today we're going to focus more on parts of Wake County, probably kind of northeast parts with Zebulon and Wendell, and then Franklin County to include Franklinton and Youngsville. So I think those two markets and kind of sub markets of Raleigh have done well, but I think more importantly are going to continue to grow and do even better. So for Youngsville, you said on the screen, I'm not going to read for verbatim what it says, but Youngsville, Old Town, charming little downtown area. They've had some capital infusion over the last 5 to 7 years, mainly from Matt Winslow from Winslow Homes. It's also part of it's U.S. Senator, kind of what his political position is, but Matt Winslow has been probably instrumental in a lot of the growth that we've seen in Youngsville. And over the last 10 to 15 years, and I'm going to bring Wake Forest into the conversation because it kind of explains why I think Youngsville is poised for growth. So for the longest time, North Raleigh was the destination place, right? So whether it was people moving from the Northeast, whether it was people moving from Florida because it was too hot, or parts of the Midwest, there was an influx of people from Ohio for whatever reason, probably between like 2012 and 2016. So we saw this influx of people. North Raleigh was the destination, but it became so expensive. And there's nice homes in North Raleigh with large lots of land, but 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, those were probably $500,000 to $700,000, or over $1 million today. So what we saw was Wake Forest started to absorb a lot of that overflow from North Raleigh. Wake Forest was not the destination. People as they relocated into Wake Forest, we saw the schools improved. We saw the area continue to get built out. I've spoken with people that over the last probably 15 years have seen Wake Forest go from what looks like Youngsville today to what North Raleigh looks like today. So Wake Forest is just blown up, and that's where our office is, that's where we live. But I use Wake Forest as the example because Wake Forest is now the destination. So no longer are people specifically looking for North Raleigh, and they still are for specific schools, don't get me wrong, but people are intentionally picking Wake Forest. And as a result of that, Wake Forest is now turned into North Raleigh. So real estate is really expensive. To find a new construction home, 3,500 square feet, 3,000 to 4,000 square feet is going to run you at least $8 to $1 million now. And that's hard to say in Wake Forest. I've lived in Wake Forest for a long time. That feels weird saying that, but don't get me wrong, I'm glad that's the case. So as Wake Forest continues to get more expensive and continues to be the destination place for people that are relocating here, we then look to Youngsville and Franklinton. Youngsville naturally up in line just because it is a little bit closer. Franklin County as a whole, for whatever reason, well, there's reasons, but as a comparison to Wake County, the lots are very flat in Franklin County. Franklin County has a lot less topography than Wake County does. So for people that are looking for a flat backyard, if they're looking not to have a walkout basement because of, declining slope in the backyard, if they're not excited about driving up a fairly steep driveway just so they can have a flat backyard, that's a lot of what we see in Wake Forest. But Youngsville is completely different. It's amazing how flat it gets as soon as you cross over the line. So Franklin County obviously has Youngsville and Franklinton in it, but for Youngsville, it is a little bit closer. There's parts of Youngsville that are probably a 5-minute drive to downtown Wake Forest. You do get more for your home, for your money. You get more house, more land. There's custom builders out in Youngsville. So I'm not coming from a perspective of people finding their forever home, but just more of explaining that Youngsville really appeals to the masses now. So it's not just someone looking for a rental. It's not just someone looking for 10 acres of land, which they have that as well. Youngsville is becoming its own little ecosystem. Not to be so naive to think that Youngsville is going to be self-sufficient, where there's tons of industry coming in that they don't need, to pull from Wake Forest or Raleigh or whatever the case is. But we're seeing Youngsville, and just Franklin County as a whole, we're seeing Youngsville continue to grow. The downtown area continuing to have more shops. You got the ice cream place, you've got a deli, Sharon's Deli, you've got what is it?
That Roost, is that like Owl Roost Brewery or whatever? Is that in there?
Well, that's Franklinton. So that would be downtown Franklinton. Yacht Club, that's what I was trying to think of. So they have the Yacht Club, which is big hangout for a lot of people. So there's actually things to do in downtown Youngsville now. There's a handful of communities that are kind of pedestrian and walkable to downtown Youngsville. So from an investment standpoint, I like Youngsville because it still has that renter draw. You still have people that likely grew up in Youngsville, they're not ready to buy, they want to rent something for a couple of years, or you have someone relocating here and their perception of North Carolina is a house with a white picket fence on 5 acres of land. We all know that is not, that's the perception in some areas of North Carolina, but in the Triangle, that's not generally reality for it. So when people are relocating here, they kind of see that, and Youngsville offers that to people. It offers them more land, it offers them fewer HOAs. But from a property management standpoint, anytime we list a home for rent in Youngsville, it gets rented immediately. Now, take that with a grain of salt, because that's been the case for the last 3 years on anything you list for rent. It doesn't matter if it's Youngsville, Franklinton, Raleigh, didn't matter. Today, it matters a little bit more. Today, we're seeing property sit on the market longer. We're seeing more competition from other rental properties and landlords, because with the higher interest rate, you've got a certain percentage of sellers that are choosing not to sell today. I don't necessarily blame them. I agree with Amy that in the next 2 years, the rates are going to come down. If they don't, this is as good as it gets. But I do believe that the rates are going to come down in the next couple of years. And when that happens, then I think naturally we see the property values not continue to increase, but increase even more. They're still continuing to somewhat increase just kind of naturally. But once those rates come down, we'll see these values continue at a quicker pace. And at that point, if I'm a seller, that's when I want to sell. So I'm going to rent my property out for a couple of years, get some, rental income, pay down some principal, get some tax benefits from it. I still lived in it 2 out of the last 5 years. So I'm not worried about capital gains if I've only had it as a rental property for 2 years and lived in it for 2 years leading up to that. So we're seeing more competition from what would be a traditional seller. So things are taking a little bit longer, but specifically in Youngsville, anytime we list something, this is going back the last 60 days, so fairly recently, it gets rented very quickly. And the prices are not that far off from Wake Forest, because you can get more house, you can generally get a little bit more land for what you're trying to buy. So Youngsville, from an investment standpoint, less competition than Wake Forest, both on the rental and the purchase side. There's a decent number of people that intentionally want to rent in Youngsville. So when something pops up, it generally gets rented pretty quickly. And we also tend to see people stay a little bit longer in these areas. They tend to be a little less transient. So instead of someone just signing a 12-month lease and then moving out or buying a house, they're renewing for 1, 2, or 3 terms, which can be valuable for a landlord if you partnered up with the right property management company that can get a little more aggressive on these renewal increases when it makes sense. The longer the tenant you have, generally the better. You avoid vacancy loss, you avoid turnover costs. You avoid paying someone like me another placement fee to find another tenant. So Youngsville just kind of encompasses what I think would and should be very attractive to investors that are looking for something that's a little bit more long-term. Youngsville is not going to be a market where you're going to find something in the next 2 or 3 years, the value is going to skyrocket so much that it just makes sense to sell it. It's going to be a little bit slower growth on the appreciation, but with slower growth and more predictable metrics, I think it becomes a little less risky as well.
We have a rental property in Youngsville that does really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
So here's your listing, 400 Legacy Drive.
Yep. So I like this one. It's in a master plan community. I forget who the builder is off the top of my head. This is a simple home. It's what I refer to, you call it a ranch, call it a patio home, but simple house, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage, 1,340 square feet. These rent all day, every day. And as Amy said in the beginning, from a cash flow standpoint, it's hard to even have that conversation today because cash flow doesn't generally exist. You compare that to conversations a couple of years ago, or even last year. We were telling investors, hey, you're probably looking at about a 5 to 6% return on your cash. So forget about appreciation, forget about principal pay down, just strictly cash on cash. If you're pulling $50,000 out of the bank, or in this case, let's call it $65,000 out of the bank for a 20% down payment, what kind of return are you going to get on that money? Today, that money is probably making anywhere from 4 to 5% in a 12-month CD. Not a bad alternative, but that is going to go away. And again, once the rates come down on mortgages, obviously those saving rates are going to come down as well. We're going to see the competition from both investors and owner occupants increase. And then you end up paying over list price again. You end up paying, probably more than what the market value is.
Right.
So today you're able to actually find something you can get under contract. It will rent well. Maybe you only lose $100 a month. Again, it's still a write-off. It's still a reduction on your taxable income. But the vantage point or the viewpoint should be, does it make sense to buy today where you actually may get it a little under market value? Wait for the rates to come down. Yes, you pay a higher interest rate for 2 conservative, let's say 3 years. But once those rates come down, you're going to get a lot more equity in the house, refi, actually start getting cash flow. And at that point, you'll probably get positive cash flow anyway, just because the rents naturally increase each year. But we're focused with our investors right now on identifying homes and locations and opportunities that will continue to grow over the next 2 or 3 years. That way, when the rates come down, it's a double whammy victory for you. You're now experiencing positive cash flow. And you're gaining a lot more equity in your investment property.
Right. I totally agree. But to communicate this with people and have them really, truly understand that buying now, like when you have a correction going on, that's when you can make money, versus if you wait a year or 2, rates come down, like you said, multiple bids, prices go up. To me, it's crystal clear. And I hope those of you that are on the webinar can see it, like really see it.
Yeah.
Anyway, about Wendell.
Yeah. So just quickly going back, it looks like Leandra had a question, what that listing would rent for. So for that one, 1,340 square feet, I would say probably 1,850 to 1,900 would be the rent on that.
Okay, let me go to Wendell. Okay, there you go.
Wendell. So Wendell, generally Wake County, which is the appeal from a school standpoint. Generally speaking, Wake County has better public schools, but I can, not from personal experience, but just from observation, I can tell you there's some really bad public schools in Wake County as well. So people are kind of comparing Wake County schools to Franklin and Johnston County. Franklin County and Johnston County will continue to improve their public school system as more people are relocating into those areas from out of state, specifically West Coast and Northeast, because the parent expectations are a little bit different. For whatever reason, they have a different level of expectations from the public schools. So we just naturally, the same thing happened in Wake Forest. You just naturally see all these school systems continue to improve. Maybe the quality of the teachers, hopefully the pay continues to increase to be a correlation with the quality of the teachers. But Wendell, Wake County Public Schools, Wendell Falls is the community that really put Wendell on the map, in my opinion. So master plan community, not a golf course community, but master plan community, brought a lot of attention. We've helped a lot of clients purchase new construction homes in Wendell Falls. We manage a couple out in Wendell Falls as well. One of the challenges that you can have with some of these master plan communities is the HOAs can start cracking down on how many rentals they allow or how many investors they allow. But just as an overall statement about Wendell, with the proximity into Raleigh, and once 540 completely loops around, it's going to make it a lot more convenient for those living in Wendell to get to the airport, to get to RTP. I wouldn't be naive to think that people working in RTP will choose to live in Wendell. I don't think that's going to be the case. But when you can make it more convenient, it just opens up the opportunities. From a rental standpoint, same thing. Wendell to me is very similar to Youngsville. Not a lot of rental properties out there, so not a lot of competition. There's tons of new construction going up out there. New construction can be a great option for investors for a couple of reasons. One, it's new construction. So you have a 1-year builder's warranty. You're not worried about any kind of major CapEx expenditures or mechanical expenditures from roof, HVAC, water heater, plumbing, electrical. So from a repair and maintenance perspective, it should be a lot less on a new construction house. But also, if you can get in early enough during the selling or the release of different buildings and phases, you generally get this built-in equity, right? So if there's whether it's a townhouse or a single family home community, if they're planning 150 homes out there and you bought the 50th home, there's 100 more that are going to go through price increases, generally speaking. Obviously, this is assuming that nothing catastrophic happens, but generally speaking, you're going to see the builder increase the premium on the ones as they get released. So for those that get in early enough, you get to take advantage of that built-in appreciation just as a function of supply and demand and how they're kind of going through these new construction ones. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. So Deer Grove.
Yep. So Deer Grove, pretty standard community out there. Not anything extraordinary about it. And that's the thing for all the communities that I think make really good rental properties. This one's a little bit bigger. Whether it's Youngsville or Wendell or Franklinton, they generally will appeal more to more of a family type setup. So I like this one just because it is a little bit bigger. It's 4 bedroom, 2.5 bath, has a 2-car front load garage, just under 2,000 square feet. Has a decent yard in the back. I don't know what the square footage on this. 10,000 square feet. So a decent sized lot for that. This one would probably rent for about 2,200 to 2,300. Compare that to maybe a year ago, maybe it was 2,400, 2,500, just because the rental market was very similar to the buy sale market. People were taking whatever they could get, however they could get it. So today we're actually seeing people list their homes for sale because they bought it 2 or 3 years ago, knowing it wasn't their dream house. They just needed something to get into. So we're seeing more opportunities that I think would make good rental properties for investors. But I like Wendell because of proximity to Raleigh, ease of access, just kind of getting through there. They have a cool little downtown. They've got the Bearded Bee, I think it is, which is a brewery. Out of all the markets, I actually like downtown Wendell the best. It feels the most like a downtown. So I think Wendell certainly is poised for continued growth. It's grown a lot, but continued growth. And until Zebulon starts infusing some money into their market, I think Wendell just naturally will continue to grow.
Right, I agree. There's been a lot of people saying that they actually want to move out that way for all the reasons that you're bringing up. And I also agree with you about Franklinton.
Yeah, so Franklinton, very similar to Youngsville. Still a lot of areas that are very rural, a lot of farmland, a lot of land that is being sold. I actually drove up to Franklinton yesterday, and along US 1 or US 1, each side, I mean, over a 3 or 4 mile stretch, you just see land for sale, land for sale, land for sale, and naturally that'll happen along a major corridor like US 1. But as Youngsville continues to grow, and as Wake Forest continues to overgrow and be overpopulated, we are seeing more people going out to Franklinton. Franklinton has a cool downtown. Some good friends of ours just bought the coffee shop, Mason and Main in downtown. So they're like revamping that. They're offering sandwiches. They're open up early. So they're trying to infuse some more capital into downtown Franklinton for it to become kind of this destination spot as well. But from a rental standpoint, it's similar to Youngsville, and even more so probably in Franklinton. You have a lot of people that were born and raised in Franklinton, and they want to move out of their parents' house. They sold their house. They went through a divorce. Divorce rates are probably the high, and this is not an accurate statement. It's just my perception. Divorce rates are probably the highest they've been in a long time because for several reasons, but one reason, and I don't know, Amy, if this was you or someone else that had mentioned this, but I thought it was very accurate. People have a lot of equity in their homes.
Right.
It makes it a lot easier to go through a divorce today from an asset allocation.
That's something to split up now, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not as detrimental financially when people are trying to do that. So we are seeing more separation of households. We're seeing, the husband or the wife say, "Hey, I'm going to hold on to this thing and keep it as a rental property." So we're getting more inquiries from potential landlords out in Franklinton, but anytime we list something in Franklinton, it gets rented immediately, partly because there's not many options there. If you're looking to rent in Franklinton, there's only a handful of options probably. So from an investor perspective, why not provide one of those options? Supply and demand. In Wake Forest, there's no shortage of investors here. There's no shortage of hedge fund companies that have come in and actually purchased up a lot of these resales over the last 2 or 3 years. But that's not happening in Franklinton, and it's generally not happening in Youngsville. So just less competition, and there's a lot of people that would prefer to rent something in Franklinton or Youngsville versus Wake Forest.
Oops, sorry. There it is. I like this home a lot. It's just so cute. It has great curb appeal. It just looks sort of like perfect.
Yeah. And I can't see the webinar anymore, so I'm not sure which slide you're on.
Oh, okay, well, that's important. Thanks for letting me know that. It's the house on Carrington Avenue. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
That means everybody else can see it too. Perfect.
Yeah. So I mean, this is like rinse and repeat for me, right? So I mean, it's actually priced a little on the low end, $299. It looks like it's got a sidecar garage. I'm not 100% sure, maybe not at 1382 square feet. But again, kind of standard floor plan, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, under $300,000 on 0.4 acres, which is a manageable size for a renter to kind of maintain. Nice front yard. I don't remember what the inside pictures look like, but this thing would rent immediately. Now, just from an investment standpoint, obviously you want to focus on how old is the roof, how old is the HVAC, when was it built, does it have polybutylene pipes in it, does it have PEX? This was built in 2009, so we don't have to worry about that. But from a mechanical standpoint, how old are the mechanicals? HVAC, water heater, and stuff like that. It probably has carpet in the living room, so there may be some cosmetic updates that an investor can do fairly cheaply to make it more appealing to people. But for a home like this in a neighborhood of Farmington Oaks and a ranch floor plan,
yeah,
it would rent immediately. I would
really
say
cute. Really cute.
Yep, I'd say this one probably 1750 to 1800 is what this would rent for.
I think you went over a lot of these already, right?
What's that?
You went over the pros.
Yeah. So just to kind of recap on the pros and cons, downtown Franklinton, I think is poised for growth. It's still close to Raleigh and Wake Forest. Like Youngsville, you get more home and land for your money. It is a little bit more affordable. The con, like we talked about, the renter demographic is mostly going to be people that either were born and raised there or have family that live there. Like I don't envision someone moving from New Jersey, renting a house in Franklinton, unless it's a large house on 5 acres of land, because that is their vision of North Carolina. So generally it is going to be a more specific renter demographic, but that same demographic is also the one that can potentially rent for 3 to 5 years. So you kind of get that built-in rent growth as part of the renewal process. And again, with Franklin County, with the schools, for locals, it doesn't matter. For someone that is looking for a rental property, the school systems generally don't matter as much. But there's also private and charter options in Franklin County. So there's Youngsville Academy, and I think there's a handful of charter and private schools there as well for those that are looking for something a little different.
So when somebody makes an offer today, Chris, could you share with us what helps get their offer accepted?
So to me, it's the cleaner, the better. And it's interesting, what makes a good offer today is obviously a stark contrast to what made a good offer even a year ago. And just for comparison purposes, if we have anyone on the call who is fortunate enough not to have to buy a house during 2021 to late 2022, it was brutal. I mean, it was just absolutely brutal for buyers. That last house we looked at, if it was listed at $299, it would have sold for $350 all day long. We have due diligence fees here. That house last year, due diligence fee would have been $20,000 to $40,000. Due diligence fees are non-refundable. It goes towards your closing costs or your down payment at closing. But if you terminate the contract for any reason whatsoever, the seller keeps that due diligence fee, and that became the norm. Today, that same house at $299, if it's still available, could sell between $295 and $299. Due diligence fee is probably about $2,000, maybe $2,500, so a lot more reasonable. We're seeing sellers more willing to offer credits on repairs and stuff like that. But a clean offer, ideally no contingency. For an investor, there shouldn't be a contingency. You shouldn't need to sell a house in order to qualify for an investment property. But if you do, if it's under contract, that makes it more appealing. But if you've got a house that hasn't been listed yet for sale and it's not under contract, but your loan is contingent on that house selling, it is going to be more challenging to get something under contract. So, first and foremost, pre-approval. Make sure you've gone through that step with your lender. We need a pre-approval letter anytime we submit an offer. No contingencies is the best, but if you've got a house for whatever reason that needs to sell and it's under contract and you've gotten through the due diligence period, we're seeing more success with that. A decent due diligence fee, again, around 1% is kind of the standard that we're seeing right now. And then a normal due diligence period, 2.5 weeks, 30 to 45 days on a closing. For an investor, unless there's something creative I'm not aware of, most likely you're putting 20% down, more likely 25% down. So that always looks good on an offer because it shows you've got, more equity in it. So if something kind of gets a little sideways with an appraisal, there's more flexibility versus someone use that as a first-time home buyer, whether they're doing FHA or 100% financing. That appraisal becomes very important because they're doing 100% financing or FHA for a reason. They're trying to limit their out-of-pocket expense. So if that appraisal comes in 5,000 under, then that's 5,000 coming out of pocket. So for investors, those offers tend to be a little bit more attractive to listing agents because they generally are a little bit cleaner.
Exactly. And people oftentimes ask me, like, Amy, when you pre-approve us, do you have to pull our credit? And I mean, of course, we have to pull your credit to approve you. Typically, what we do is we pull up one score to start. And then once we submit it to underwriting, underwriting is going to want to see all 3 scores. And you say, why? And it's because when some companies only report to one bureau. In fact, years ago, the credit union here, the State Employees Credit Union, didn't report to any bureaus, right? They typically report to one bureau, which doesn't help you build your credit. So we have to see all 3 bureaus to see what debts you really have, because some of them won't be reported to one bureau or 2 bureaus. And Chris, I wanted to sort of get an idea from you, because people are also asking us, like, Amy, is there a bubble? Are prices going to go down? I think you've already addressed this, but where do you see prices going in the next, let's say, couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you ask 10 people this question, we get 15 different opinions on it. But my perception and my opinion is, if we can agree rates will come down in the next 2 or 3 years, which I think they will, 100% transparency, I think long gone are the days of the 3% interest rates. I would not hold out for that to return anytime soon. I actually think the rates were too low for too long, which resulted in a huge increase very quickly. But anyway, but no, I do think that we are going to see values continue to increase. When you think about it logically, you've gone from, call it a 3% interest rate. And this is for investors as well. I mean, I've got some investors that locked in on a 30-year fixed at 2.75%. That's almost free money, right? The banks did better loaning out money at 2.75% because they had to pay 0 to the Fed versus today at 7% and paying the Fed whatever their rate is. So banks are actually making less money today with the much higher interest rates than they were when they were almost giving money away. But so if we can assume and agree that rates will come back down into the 5s, I think 5% interest rate kind of ignites all the buyer frenzy and craziness, especially after the last, 8 months of 6.5% to 7.5%. 5% feels really good at that point. 6.5% feels really good at that point. But once the rates come down, we're going to see the values get back up. And when you think about, the values at 2.75, they went from A to B, really high. And then rates went from 2.75 to 7.5 for some investors. But the values kind of stayed where they were. And when you consider the percentage of cost of ownership for either an investor or for a home buyer, that went up exponentially. So for values to maintain where they were, generally speaking, I think is a huge testament of our market and how we are somewhat, I don't want to use the word sheltered, but insulated from some of the exterior factors. Not all exterior factors, but some. So again, once the rates come back down into the 5s, where investors can start getting some positive cash flow again, naturally the demand increases from investors and from typical homeowners, and supply and demand has only one thing to do is to increase the values. I think being realistic is key as well. We're not going to see the appreciation that we saw from, say, 20 to 22. Part of that is because money was free. And the other part of it, and I can't quantify the percentage on it, but the other part of that is and people on this call that are from this area will disagree with me on this, but people that have relocated here in the last 5 years likely would not disagree. It's been too cheap in our market for a long time. Housing has been undervalued for a while.
I agree.
When you think about access to education, when you think about the companies that are here, the worker talent that is here, the proximity to the beach, proximity to the ocean, 4 seasons, we don't have traffic issues. People think we do. We don't. We don't have traffic issues, and people are generally nice here. So when you put all those things together, you got a great value living in Raleigh. And that's why everyone moved here. You know, the secret is out. Everyone moved here because of those reasons. So part of that kind of correction is I think it has been undervalued. So a certain percentage of that is probably where pricing should have been 2 or 3 years leading up to it. And then the other part of it is the fear of missing out from buyers and, you know, people getting overly excited about locking into a 30-year mortgage at 2.75%.
And you're exactly right. The property values did not really rise very much, you know, in the last 20 years. And so they basically corrected themselves. I agree. And that's where you can make money, everybody. And looking back at this chart, I think it's important that we look at it because a lot of economists feel that we're going to be heading into a recession. This housing chart, the black lines here indicate the recessions over the last 50 years, 55 years. And you can see that home prices only went down during one recession. Okay, that was back in 2008. And I want to explain why that happened. In 2008, we had over 4 million homes on the market. Okay, right now in America, we only have 1 million homes on the market. And in fact, the real story is we only have about 60% of that, because almost half of those are under contract. So what Chris brought up about inventory, about supply and demand, it's real. There is not enough supply for the great demand that we have. And so buying real estate and waiting is a very good way for you to increase your financial worth. How do you finance an investment property? Some people, actually quite a few people, own their properties free and clear. If you own your primary residence free and clear, that's a great feeling. Don't get me wrong, that is awesome. But the cheapest way that you can borrow money is on your primary residence. Okay, so should you buy a rental property and finance it, or should you maybe do a cash out refinance on your primary residence and pay cash for the rental? That is a very good question and one worth exploring, because the closing costs are significantly less on a primary residence. The interest rates are less on a primary residence. And so possibly looking to the equity that you have now that we are living in an equity rich, basically, society is a smart thing to do. And so I have some clients that own like 20 rental properties and they only owe about $30,000 or $40,000 on some of their rentals, which means that they're really getting no tax deduction. In their case, what we're doing is some cash out refinances on their rentals, taking cash out so that they can buy other investment properties because they have a little loan on there and they're really not getting much in tax benefits on it. So there's lots of ways to work the problem. Where do you get the equity? Where do you get the money to buy these properties? The average homeowner, and Chris alluded to this, what's happening with divorces, and I'm a specialist, I'm a divorce mortgage specialist as well. And right now we do see divorces, as Chris mentioned, on the rise because couples now have equity. They have $100,000 more in equity now than what they had just a few years ago. So remember, you are not marrying the interest rate on a house. You're just simply dating the interest rate. You are marrying what you pay for the house, which is going to go up in value. It's simply going to go up in value if you wait to buy. So that's a really big deal. I know some people on the call are first-time buyers. The North Carolina Housing has an amazing program. In fact, you don't even have to be a first-time buyer to get some down payment assistance from North Carolina Housing. But this particular program where you get $15,000 on your primary residence is unbelievable. I've only seen a program like this one time when I've been in the mortgage business 30 years. So this is in all 100 counties in North Carolina. So we have a down payment assistance webinar coming up. But if you'd like to talk about strategy and if investing is something that you can consider, give us a call or drop us an email. We'll be happy to set up a time to chat. You can reach out to myself or Chris, whatever you feel more comfortable with. I know Chris is going to, and his team there at Property Specific are going to want you to get pre-approved. So we'll be happy to pre-approve you. And we have these workshops continuing over the next few weeks, next 6 or 7 weeks. Next week, we're going to be talking about Lake Royale and the Lewisburg area. Mary Lou Dingman actually lives in that area now, and she's been in real estate for over 20 years. So wanted to thank you guys so much for coming on the call, coming on the webinar. And Chris, you're amazing. I appreciate you being here so much. Thank you guys.
Thank you for having me.
Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask Chris before we depart for today? If you do, put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask away.
Linda had one question. She wanted to know about using home equity loan for an investment property as opposed to refinancing.
Good question. Linda, you may or may not know this. First of all, everybody, a home equity line is a mortgage. It's just an equity line of credit. It's like an accordion. You can borrow it all and then pay it down and then borrow it again. Cool, very good to have. Problem, adjustable rate. And then so they are not fixed. And in fact, equity line rates are nearing with many lenders 8%. So unless you're going to pay that off very quickly, Linda, you would get a cheaper and better deal on a fixed rate mortgage. And for us, for our repeat clients, we do no closing cost refinances on their primary residences. So if you can't get home equity lines on investment properties, so you could get them on your primary residence. In some cases, we are recommending for people to get home equity lines. It's just based on what their balance of their first mortgage is compared to their equity and what their debt load is. Like, should they be paying off debt that is a much higher interest rate than their mortgage? And as a certified wealth coach, we go through all of that. Any other questions? And also, I wanted to mention to you guys that Chris Webb owns a property management firm, and we should probably have a webinar on that, Chris, if you're open to it. Maybe after all this series, like just have you talk about, should somebody self-manage their properties, or what is involved in property management? Because so you guys, if you have questions about property management, I highly recommend that you reach out to Chris. And I wanted to thank you all for being here. I want to respect everybody's time. We're a little bit over, so I want to thank you and mention that. I hope that's okay, Chris. That they can.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
Friends, any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate your time, everybody. Chris Webb, fantastic job. Thank you. Bye, everybody. I hope you guys have a great day. Maybe see you next week. Ciao.